Hi, Ross Pluskin here at the Top Shelf Aquatics Farm. Here I am at our retail store, and man, we have a treat for you today. My favorite part of the reef aquarium industry are these delicious, wonderful rabbit holes that we get into, where you're researching one thing, you're getting more and more into it, maybe you're trying to solve a problem, or maybe you're trying to research a new fish you want to buy, and you just get more and more wrapped up in just trying to learn as much as you can, and the knowledge radiates out. So that happened to us when we were going through our Tribes of Tangs video, where we were trying to break down the Acan 30 into its various different tribes and trying to give them a little bit more of a categorization. And during that video, we really had a lot of difficulty not only researching, but even finding stock footage of the Prionurus, the tribe of the Sawtail Tangs. Very distinct from the Nasoni, like this blonde naso that we see, and the Acanthurus, such as the powdered brown that's in this enclosure. The Prionurus are the sawtails. They are a very unique tang, one that is not commonly available in the reef aquarium industry, and there's a few reasons for that, but still a wonderful, unique genera of fish that has some very interesting contrast with the rest of its tang brethren that we discussed in our last video. So, first and foremost, we're going to be really showcasing this species in particular. This is Prionurus crisuris. This is the Indonesian or the yellow sawtail tang. In 2001, this fish was discovered for the very first time. There was a scientist, an ichthyologist that was diving off the coast of Indonesia. He saw something that he had never seen before that looked tang-like, speared it, brought it back, and all of a sudden, science, and by extension, the aquarium industry, has a new species to admire and learn from. This is really exciting because the Prionurus, especially this species right here, has wonderful contrast with some of the more shallow water tang tribes and species that we talked about in our last video. Let's do a quick contrast in both geographical distribution and habitat desire when it comes to the various different tangs. Now let's compare one of these more elongated naso tangs, like the blonde naso or a unicorn tang. This very elongated shape, large maximum body size, this fish is traveling distances. It's going from reef flat to reef flat, reef to reef, finding and exploring new forage grounds. Now, the Zimmersomidae, such as this yellow tang right here, very more compressed, descript shape for being able to navigate a little bit more around the inner crevices of rock. Perfectly capable of moving from reef to reef, but not the same geographical distance that a naso tang can adopt. Now we see here those two different kind of ecological preferences, and we see a big contrast right off the bat with the Prionurus, where they are actually very, very limited in their geographical distribution. A lot of these different tang species can travel across oceans and seas, and though we don't see every tang species in every ocean, we see a good deal of overlap, especially in the Indo-Pacific. With the Prionurus, this is not the case. They are far more restricted to just a couple different geographical areas. This species in particular, Prionurus crisuris, was pretty much is only known to inhabit reef slopes associated with Flores, the island of Flores in Indonesia, where not far from the island where the Komodo dragons are from, and off the coast of Lombok, another island in Indonesia. These very, very, very limited geographical areas are ascribed to the fact that the Prionuridae, scientists believe, are a relic of the glacial era. They are a species which dominated when global Earth temperatures were a lot cooler than they were now. So for the majority of this genus, they have been restricted to areas where there's upwelling, areas where surface water is constantly being moved by wind, and cold, nutrient-rich bottom water is constantly being wafted up. These are fish that tolerate and prefer cooler temperatures of 70 to 74 degrees. They do not like it nearly as hot as some of their more shallow water brethren in the Acan 30. So this shallow reef slope habitat, it's a fascinating contrast when we compare it to the brightly illuminated reef flats and even the more shallow areas of the reef slopes that the other tangs inhabit. These tangs are inhabiting slopes where there's probably far less light exposure, and they're grazing on benthic algae that probably is of a wildly different composition both in species and in how it's growing, the environmental conditions, than the forage that most of these more surface-dwelling tangs will likely experience. Now, there's probably some overlap in the dietary grazing, but it is fascinating and important to consider that for the most part, these are a deeper water, cold tang. And because of that, there may be some fascinating intricacies when it comes to satisfying their diet and their long-term nutritional needs. Let's contrast the different body shapes of the three various tangs that we have here before us. We have a naso tang, a blonde naso right here, where we can see that those outward peduncle spines are always fixed outward. They don't tuck back in, let's say like this yellow tang does, for instance. It doesn't have a switchblade that it can retract. We can see that the Prionurus is kind of a fascinating fusion of the two, where the body almost looks like an Acanthurus tang, yet we can see towards the base of that tail outward projecting bony spines. And this is characteristic of the Prionurus genus as a whole. Prionurus meaning saw tail, and these bony-like saw plates are a defining characteristic of this genus. For this particular species in particular, Prionurus chrysurus refers to the fact that it is the sawtail, with chrysurus from the Greek meaning yellowtail. It is the yellow-tailed sawtail. So in conclusion, this fish is a wonderful hallmark of various things going on in the reef aquarium hobby. The first is that it was only discovered in 2001, and it, like many other additions to the hobby, are recently discovered fish altogether. New to you, new to me, new to every fish specialist scientist in the room. And that is fascinating because there's so much that we can still learn about these organisms that were only discovered very recently. And especially considering some of the deep water difficult habitats where it's difficult to observe these guys, the aquarium industry and keeping these fish alive in aquaria may be an important way to be able to cultivate some ambassador individuals for this species that we can learn a lot more about, and through extension, learn a lot more intimate details about the biology of their wild brethren. Something else that should be considered is that this is a deep water slope tang. It really allows us to really appreciate the variances in the various different tangs, whether or not they be a long, elongate naso, or a compact zebrasoma, or even something that's only adept to really cruising up and down slopes continuously. Tangs come in all these different flavors, shapes, sizes, mouth sizes, different gastrointestinal capacities to digest different forage, and it's so important. The Prionurus reminds us that we should never lump them all together strictly as having the same set of care requirements. Every tribe of tang, genus of tang, and species and individual of tang has specific needs and should always be appreciated on the intimate level for what the organism actually is. So, I'm very pumped today because this is my first time ever being able to see a member of this genus in person. I can't help but wonder if when I was a child I might have seen one in a public aquarium somewhere, but I'm not sure entirely. So my challenge to you in the comments is, if you've ever seen this fish, even in an aquarium shop or especially in a public aquarium setting where hopefully it'd be an older individual that did well, comment below. I'm very interested to see how this fish has been kept and whether or not there are success or failure stories associated with it thus far. Thank you so much. Please like, subscribe. Please feed the algorithm like a hungry sawtail tang grazing down a bunch of benthic macroalgae, and we will see you next time.